Today, we're going to be talking about Uganda, and I always pull up the maps. I know the maps might be getting tiresome to some people, but the maps are here because a lot of people don't even know basic geography. So, Uganda is this country right here in the heart of Africa. It borders Kenya, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan right here. Very large country, very diverse country, a lot of beautiful people there. And yeah, let's talk about it. So today we're talking about this documentary that Netflix is doing about this white woman who was a missionary who went to Africa. She pretended to be a doctor, lied about having medical experience, and the children under her care died. And this covers a lot of things that I talk about on my channel all the time: white supremacy, white privilege, the deniability of guilt for white people, Africans worshiping whiteness, white Christianity influencing the minds of Africans, allowing us to be abused and exploited. It's a constant thing that we need to be fighting against. Now, I want to get this out of the way real quick, too, because this is something that low key bothers me. Not a lot, but just a little bit. There are some people that come into my comment section and call me a coon or an Uncle Tom or a hypocrite for speaking about issues related to our people, but my wife being white. And I just want to say, it doesn't matter who you love, as long as you always speak up against white supremacy and attack white supremacy. Doesn't matter who you love. I would only be a coon if I never spoke out against white women doing racist, evil stuff like what we're going to talk about today. I would only be a coon if I never talked about the racism that I experienced in my wife's home country of Turkey. I would only be a coon if I never talked about anything related to anti-blackness and white supremacy. That's what makes you a coon, not who you decide to put your penis in, or who you decide to marry, or who you decide to love, who you decide to go on dates with. That's what matters. So today, let's talk about it. So we're talking about this documentary called Savior Complex, which will be released by HBO. The official trailer is here. I will not play the trailer because YouTube does not play when it comes to copyrighted material. I have not gotten a copyright strike on my channel. I don't hope to, so I won't be playing the video, but it's easy to find here if you go on YouTube and look for it. Also, the links for all the things that we will be talking about are in the description of this video. So it's not hard to find. But let's build about this. All right. So basically the documentary is about this woman right here. Her name is Renee Bach, right? And she's going to be going to Africa, trying to help children. Let's read about the description of this. So this was published on September 6, 2023, bellmedia.ca. HBO original three-part docuseries Savior Complex debuts September 26. Investigation into an American missionary accused of misconduct in Uganda from executive producer Roger Ross Williams. The HBO original three-part docuseries Savior Complex from Emmy-winning filmmaker Jackie Jesko, executive produced by Nick Capote, Alex Waterfield, and Academy Award winner Roger Ross Williams. HBO's Love to Love You, Donna Summer, God Loves Uganda, debuts Tuesday, September 26th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Crave, followed by episodes 2 and 3 streaming Wednesday, September 27th, beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Man, we need to get the writer's strike over. For real, everything now is true crime, reality shows, or documentaries. We need to get the writer's strike over because we need some more good content, some more fiction, some things that will make us laugh, cry, and think. Not stories like this. Come on now, don't make this woman a hero just because you don't want to pay the writers. Let's build. Synopsis: Savior Complex chronicles the controversial story. Pardon. Savior Complex chronicles the controversial story surrounding Renee Bach, a young American missionary who felt called by God to set up a charity for malnourished children in Jinja, Uganda. But years later, shocking allegations arose that Renee was treating the sick children herself without medical qualifications. Detailing Renee's divisive journey, this series addresses the wider questions around white saviorism and the ethics of foreign aid work done in the name of humanitarian and religious ideals. At the age of 19, Renee, a Virginia homeschooled high school graduate and evangelical missionary, founded Serving His Children, SHC, an organization to help feed and care for malnourished children in Uganda, amid whistleblower accusations that Renee was treating the six children herself with no medical qualifications. A social media activist group called No White Saviors starts to draw public attention to the situation, calling Renee the angel of death and a poster child for neocolonialism. With Renee denying the accusations and claiming that her work was guided by God and helped save hundreds of lives, Savior Complex takes a close look at the thorny complexities of missionary work when local facilities are underfunded and non governmental organizations, NGOs, fill the gap to provide resources in developing countries. With extraordinary access to Renee, her accusers, lawyers, activists, and mothers who seek to hold her accountable, the series addresses the timely and provocative issues at the intersection of religion, race, and power. Sounds like a very good documentary, and I'm not going to lie, I'm probably going to watch it, though I will try not to give money to HBO for doing this, but I will watch to get into the mentality of this white supremacist who decided that she was going to be a savior to Africans, that she was going to help the Africans there, and ended up killing black children. And we're going to get deeper into her story, right? So in episode 1, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. This will debut on Tuesday, September 26th. At 19 years old, Renee Bach felt God's call to serve as a missionary and moves to Jinja, Uganda to start a charity that addresses childhood malnutrition. She earns the support of local Ugandan officials and foreign donors alike. But when an American nurse comes to volunteer at the charity, she makes a shocking discovery and accuses Renee of treating those medically fragile children herself with only a high school diploma to her name. Right. Let's talk about Africa real quick. I started my whole teaching career in Africa. I started my whole YouTube career in Africa. There are a lot of opportunities in Africa because, unfortunately, the rules, regulations, and monitoring of what's going on is not really happening by the authorities in Africa. I studied music in university and ended up becoming an English teacher in a university in Tunisia, right? How could I fail up like that? That's only because in Africa, you don't really have those checks and balances, unfortunately. And if I was white, I would be in Africa right now because I would have white privilege. And on top of that, whatever little experience you have, you can double that in Africa. It's a real true thing. Like I've seen it with my own eyes. There is a lot of money and opportunity in Africa, especially if you're white and coming from a Western country. And Renee took advantage of that. She used her white privilege, her passport privilege, her American privilege, everything to go there in Africa and be seen as somebody who should be given authority over other people's children just because of who she was, not what she knew. Had a high school diploma trying to treat kids. Let's go to episode 2. Cast the First Stone. Debut date Wednesday, September 27th. The volunteer nurse makes a formal complaint to Renee's board about her concerns and resigns as donations to SHC hit an all-time high. While the charity expands and hires more staff, there are rumors that Renee is continuing to practice medicine herself. As a result, a disillusioned former missionary joins forces with a Ugandan activist to make sure that the story of Renee's alleged deadly white saviorism is heard around the world. And episode 3, Reap What You Sow. This will debut on Wednesday, September 27th. Renee is back in the United States facing a lawsuit brought by a Ugandan human rights attorney on behalf of 2 bereaved mothers. While she fights against the accusations in the lawsuit, the social media movement against her escalates, and Renee must reckon with her choices and questions her faith and desire to serve. So, the featured participants in this documentary. The series features intimate access to Renee Bach and her mother, Lori Bach, the U.S. director of SHC, as well as the activists, lawyers, and whistleblowers seeking to hold her accountable. Interview subjects include Olivia Alasso and Kelsey Nielsen, the founders of No White Saviors, Constance Alonyo, SHC's head nurse, Jackie Kramblick, a SHC volunteer turned whistleblower, Dr. Abner Tagula, head of pediatrics at Jinja Hospital, Prima Kawagla, a human rights attorney who led a civil suit against Renee, Kakai Anet and Gimbo Zubadeya, the 2 mothers who sued Renee, claiming their children died at SHC. And here are the credits for the show. So once again, I have to say, the fact that they're making this documentary about this woman will validate what she did, right? A lot of people, unfortunately, watch these shows and don't think about I shouldn't do this, they can say I can get away with this because Renee walked away from this not having to serve any jail time, not having to admit wrongdoing. She's going to walk away with this and be able to say, you know, I just didn't know what I was doing. I had a big heart and mistakes happen and God knows my intentions and that sort of thing. Meanwhile, we have dead children and she gets to be a reality star now. It's not fair. Let's go. So this is an article from Atlanta Black Star. White supremacy at its peak. HBO Max faces backlash over Savior complex documentary about a white woman impersonating a doctor and treating black babies in Uganda. This was written by Nicole Duncan Smith, published on September 18th, 2023. HBO Max is facing backlash after dropping the trailer to an upcoming documentary about the work of Renee Bach, a white American who went to Africa and misrepresented herself as a medical professional. The project, called Savior Complex, unpacks how the Virginian went on a mission to Uganda and decided to set up a center to help malnourished children in the country. Here's a picture of Renee here holding a black baby. And man, I hope HBO Max fails. You know, a few days ago, I came back home after going for a walk, and my wife was on the couch watching Insecure, Issa Rae's Insecure on the couch. And I was like, okay, did you open up movies to watch or something like that? She said, no, she was watching it on Netflix. And I'm like, wait, Insecure is an HBO show. How are you watching HBO on Netflix? Is HBO okay? I'm like, damn, Netflix is winning the streaming wars. And I was actually sad about that. I spoke with my wife and I said, you know what? I hope HBO gets back on their feet or something like that, because the writer's strike is killing everybody. For anybody who doesn't know, in in America right now, all the writers for all the comedy shows, movies, television, everything, they're on strike because the producers, the big studios, they want to use AI. So right now, I guess all the studios are struggling. They can't get any original content. I guess ChatGPT ain't working out for them, right? Anyway, I'm in support of the writer's strike. I'm in support of them because obviously these networks need studios and people to work for them. But I was telling my wife, you know, HBO Max needs to get on their feet because they're licensing their content now to Netflix. They got to, you know, get back together because I like HBO. HBO's done a lot of great shows. Come on now. They're like the premier place for great television. But now that they're doing this, making heroes out of white women that go and murder African children, oh no, 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 no. That's not what we're rocking with. By the way, anybody in the chat, leave a comment, leave anything. We're replying to comments. I know it might be early in the morning where you are or in the afternoon, but we're building heavy right here. So let's go and continue this article. Bach left her home in Virginia to set up her charity, serving his children, in 2010, and chronicled her life as a white doctor to the villagers in the blog, Angels of Africa. I will not be playing any videos. All the links to all the videos will be in the description here. YouTube does not play with the copyrights. I can talk to y'all. Y'all talk to me, I'll talk back. So, from 2010 to 2015, she reportedly took in 940 children, and of them, 105 died. In 2019, she was sued in a Ugandan civil court by two women and a civil rights organization for unauthorized child services that endangered the lives of children. That is crazy. For in 5 years, 105 children died. In 5 years, 105 children died. How many is that? I'm going to just divide that by five, man. 105 divided by five. I'm not that good at math. That's 21 children dying under her custody every year. Think about that, man. Think about that, man. Me as an English teacher, if I miss 21 classes over a year, I'm going to get fired by any company I work for. If you have a job right now and you're watching this and you miss 21 days out of the year for no reason, you won't even make it to the end of the year. You're going to get fired. You can kill 21 black children. 21 black children, if you don't kill them, they can die under your custody, and you can continue to practice. You can continue to have a charity. People will continue to give you money. People will continue to validate you, and what you're doing is right. And that's absolutely wrong. And the blame goes both ways. The blame goes to the Africans, primarily, first and foremost, for always worshiping white people. I've said this many, many times. When I went to Africa, the thing that broke my heart the most was seeing Africans worship white people, images of white Jesus everywhere, all around East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, in Mauritius as well. I did not get the chance to go to Uganda, but I am more than sure they have big statues, big pictures of white Jesus everywhere. When any white person visit these countries, people follow them, chase them around, beg them for money, look at them as if they're superior. It is very real. If you have not seen it with your own eyes, please go watch the content I've made on my channel during my travels to East Africa. Please go watch other black YouTubers who have spoken about this. It is a very real thing. It's so real that they have actually done studies that Ugandan children favor white people over other black people. And that's a shame. That's that shows the white supremacist infestation of the black mind, and that needs to be killed. And the Ugandans who allow these white missionaries to come and they smile and tap dance for them and give them the best accommodations and make them feel oh so comfortable in Africa and all this. Meanwhile, these missionaries and these other groups in Africa and literally kill African children. They sent a 19-year-old white woman who only had a high school degree to go practice medicine in Uganda, and 105 black children ended up dead. If that's not white supremacy, if that's not white privilege, being able to go to Africa and kill black children or black children dying under your custody and nothing happens to you, I don't know what is. I don't know what white supremacy is if this is not it right in front of your eyes. And this is a tragedy. This woman should be buried under the jail. But let's continue building on this. So the trailer for the docuseries, which premieres on September 26th, states Savior Complex is a 3-part HBO documentary series examining missionary work in Uganda, where an American is accused of causing the death of vulnerable Ugandan children by dangerously treating them despite having no medical training. In the nearly 3-minute clip, Bach seems to be clueless about her offense, particularly since she claims she was sent by God. It also shows black Africans disputing her white savior complex narrative, claiming she was the reason so many children died despite being under her care. I hope they keep it real in the documentary. I hope they don't make it seem like the Africans are always suspicious of the Mazungus that come around, that the Ugandan people don't smile and tap dance, and when they see white people, they get oh so happy. I hope they make it seem real that a lot of Ugandans, a lot of Kenyans, a lot of Tanzanians, a lot of Africans, when they see white people, they see them as gods on earth, kings and queens on earth, and they smile and tap dance for them. And that allows white people to come in and exploit and extort Africa constantly, constantly. And that needs to be killed. I don't care who doesn't like me because I say it, because you know it's true. You know it's true. I'm going to continue building. On the network's social media, the tag for the film is Are Good Intentions Good Enough? One celebrity who posted about the series, DL Hughley, he shared the trailer on his Instagram with the caption, you know what they say, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Good intentions and evil agendas don't mix. So this is from Instagram from DL Hughley. So let's read a little bit of his quote. We talked a lot about this woman well over a year ago. She was running a fake clinic in Africa when she was never a doctor. It was reported that many, many babies died while in her care. Who gives a crap about her intentions? She's a fraud and a failure, and African babies paid the price. F this woman and this docuseries, even making this where she looks like a victim who tried to do good in any way is absolutely disgusting. I don't want to hear from Renee, this phony white savior. I want to hear from the Africans who witnessed what she was doing. I hope there's more of their voices than the holier than thou BS that's spewing. Why is HBO giving her a voice? This was, once again, man, Black Americans, we continue to speak out for Africa because, once again, D.L. Hughley is a famous Black American comedian. He probably doesn't have any family in Uganda, any ties to Uganda at all, but it's in our culture, our lineage, our heritage to always speak up against anti-black racism in Africa, whether it affects us directly or not. Actually, no, all anti-black racism, all white supremacy, wherever it appears in the world, affects us directly because we realize as Black Americans, no matter who is discriminated against, it always comes back to us. There's not one white supremacist in the world who hates women and doesn't also hate Black people. There's not a white supremacist in the world. There's not a hateful person in the world. There's not a racist person in the world who doesn't have a bias against one group of people and doesn't also hate Black people. So if these white supremacists in hiding, because a lot of these missionaries, as we'll find out, are also white supremacists. We're going to build on that later. If a lot of these white supremacists go to Africa to do their white saviorism, to kill black children, to sexually abuse black children, to kidnap black children, like we're going to be talking about later, we're going to get real heavy in this stream. Everything that they do in Africa, we're always going to speak out against it. We're going to protest against it. And we're always going to give the Africans warnings. We can only give the Africans warnings, guys, because let's be real, there are more black Africans than there are black Americans or black people in the diaspora or black people that are actually woke and aware about the effects white supremacy is having on the world. We can only give warnings to the Africans. It's up to the Africans to accept it or not. And based on my content that I've released, when I went to Kenya, when I went to Tanzania, the Africans are not ready to hear the truth. They're not ready to hear the truth that all that tap dancing they do for white people, all that smiling and grinning in the faces of white people that they do, all the stuff that they say when they see white people, white is beautiful, I want a Mzungu woman, I want to go to Europe, all the stuff the Africans say. We've been warning them about all the bleaching cream they've been selling to each other, all the whitening soap they've been selling to each other. We're giving y'all warnings right now. Y'all keep on worshiping white people like this, y'all will get colonized again and again and again and again and again until y'all wake up. We've been dealing with the devil for years. People like Renee Bach, we know. I grew up in a Presbyterian church, right? Mostly white church. My dad forced me to be around these sorts of people, and their worldview is sick. They deny that racism even exists. They think that America is an inherently good country. They think that Jesus is white. They think that the early Christians were all white. This is the worldview of the type of American Christians that are going to Africa to do this sort of charity, missionary work. They don't go to Africa because they love Africans. These white missionaries are going to Africa because they see Africans as inferior, as people that need to be civilized. They believe they are spreading their culture and their values to help the Africans who are less than. That's what y'all need to understand. And this message is for the Africans. As a black American, I've known Renee Box all my life. And these people do not respect y'all. They might be holding black babies in photos and in pictures. They might seem like they're nice and friendly, but they are not. They are not. They look down on us. They look down on us and they hate us. By and large, not all white people, but white supremacists and people that are implicitly white supremacists. And Renee Box of the world, who grew up in this white Christianity that they're indoctrinated with, don't see black people as inherently equal to them. They see them as people that need to be civilized, brought into Christendom to made better. This has been proven throughout history and throughout time. Let's continue to build. So, other comments poured in about the documentary, commenting on Bach's actions. How did Africa allow her to walk away? White supremacy at its peak is a white woman moving to Uganda, posing as a fake doctor, running a fake clinic, having hundreds of Ugandan babies die under her care, then being platformed in a docuseries because intentions were good. Sad. Why isn't she under the dirt? Now, I'm not saying that we need to exact vengeance, because as I've said before many times, God is our get back, black people. But women like Renee Bach do not deserve Jenna, heaven. They do not deserve to be in the afterlife or in paradise if one does such exist, if such does exist, right? People like this deserve to burn in hell. And I mean that with all my heart, right? So this is a tweet from a woman called Cake Lady, Got Cake. All right. Renee Bach, an American missionary who operated a charitable treatment center for severely malnourished children in Uganda, despite having no medical training, has settled a lawsuit brought against her in Ugandan civil court by two women and a civil rights organization. At least 105 children died in the charity's care. That's insane. And once again, this shows why we need institutions in Africa that are able to hold people accountable. We need to be able to put a person like Renee Bach in jail. And let's be real, the reason why she probably didn't go to jail is because she has white privilege and American privilege and that sort of thing. And she would probably die in a Ugandan jail, hands down. But we need to be able to not have our institutions in Africa, right, for our countries to be so corrupt where they can allow this woman just to walk away. They need to hold her accountable. And once again, this shows white supremacy and white privilege, because if there was a warrant out for the arrest of an American in Uganda who was trying to evade the law or evade some sort of crime that they did, Uganda would extradite that person immediately. But Renee Bach is probably back in America somewhere sipping lattes at Starbucks, chatting with her friends about all the black people that she helped in Uganda. And if Uganda put a warrant out for her arrest, the American government would be very slow to return this blonde haired, blue eyed white woman back to Africa to face the charges for the crimes of killing 105 black children. That shows white supremacy. That's true power. For anybody who's going to say there's no such thing as white supremacy is having power, being able to dictate who is valuable, who is invaluable, whose lives deserve saving, and whose lives do not matter. In this case, the lives of 105 black children do not matter in the comparison to the safety and privilege of this one white woman. And that's a shame. Let's continue. Most especially crimes committed against black people. Bach would go on to resolve the Ugandan civil court lawsuit, with her and the charity agreeing to pay approximately $9,500 to each mother without admitting wrongdoing. That's incredibly sad. The life of your child is worth about 10K, less than 10K, right? That's sad. That's sad. Now I know 10K or 9.5K in Uganda is probably a lot of money, probably 2 years worth of salary for the average Ugandan, right? But that's still not enough to compensate for that. Plus, that is not just. That is not just. Taking the lives of children is not just at all. And women like Renee Bach should have paid more for her crimes. However, people online also criticized HBO, calling for a boycott of the movie. One said, "How about no one watch it? When it drops, if the app allows it, rate it bad on the main screen." That's what we should do, because that's what the white supremacists are doing right now. HBO wants to make a documentary making somewhat of a hero or somewhat of a sympathetic character out of a woman who murdered 105 black children. We need to do, people on the left or people who are sympathetic to black causes, whether they are black, white, or whatever, need to downwrite those movies just like the white supremacists did and the right wing did when the Little Mermaid came out. When the right saw that the Little Mermaid was going to be black, boy, they bombed the hell out of that movie on Rotten Tomatoes and every other review site, which is why I don't even trust reviews anymore. When I go and watch movies now, I don't even check the reviews, because I know if there's a black character or an interracial couple in there, or if the main character is gay, or if the topic is about something that the right doesn't like, they bomb the hell out of the reviews. So I don't even trust movie reviews anymore. I watch what I want to watch. I take the risk and gamble, because you never know why people are downvoting something. People downvoted, like I said, The Little Mermaid just because it was black, and people downvoted Black Panther 2. People downvote any sort of movie that they just don't agree with politically, because now everything is polarized and politicized, right? We can't just have entertainment, which is why we need to end the writer's strike. Hollywood, end the writer's strike. We don't need any more true crime. We don't need any more documentaries. HBO, you're fucking up. That's why Netflix is taking all your shows. That's why they're taking your market share. HBO, get it together. All the studios, get it together. Pay the writers. We don't need any more true crime. We don't need to make these white women heroes for killing black babies. Let's stop it. Stop it. All right, I'm going to continue building. But yeah, like I said, let's downvote this movie. I'm going to put a thumbs down, but I'm still going to watch it. But I'm going to watch it on a pirate site. Let's continue to build. But water break. Another said, "Why don't we hold HBO accountable and fight the release like everybody did for the white supremacy series on A&E a few years ago?" Wow. So, due to the backlash, A&E abruptly canceled a series about the KKK clan. Don't they mean the Ku Klux Klan? I've never heard of the KKK clan. What is that? Chloe Kim Courtney clan? Titled Generation KKK. Yeah, that's got to be Chloe Kim and Courtney. Before it was expected to air, it intended to highlight the group's racist history against African Americans and others, but some felt it would normalize the hate group. This film also arrived after Republican candidate Donald Trump won his presidential election in 2016. Yeah, what's the point of pointing out the horrors of the KKK when the American public, a minority of the American public, because Donald Trump did not win the popular vote, a minority of the electorate voted for a white supremacist in office. Yeah, F Donald Trump. But yeah, so this is sad. This is white supremacy at its finest, at its peak. Wow, you couldn't make a better story about this. A better example of white supremacy just in play. You know who this woman, Renee Bach, reminds me of? This nurse who went to Africa and murdered 105 African children. Uh, she reminds me of Lucy Letby. Does anybody know who this person is? If you don't know, she is a white woman from the UK who was a nurse in a hospital, and she killed, I believe, about 7 or 8 children. I have the article here, so let's pull it up. I am evil, wrote British nurse found guilty of murdering 7 babies in her care. Yeah, 7 children. This was written by Pete Wilkinson, and it was published on August 18th, 2023. She just got arrested. This blonde haired, blue eyed white woman in the UK was able to murder 7 children. And even though other doctors, other nurses were saying, hey, Lucy is there's something going on with Lucy because we have all these dead babies in the hospital. And every time a baby dies, Lucy is right nearby. And nobody was able to put two and two together because of white privilege. If this had been a black woman, if this had been an Indian woman, if this had been a woman of some other ethnicity, if she was in the other side of the hallway when a baby died in that hospital, they would be saying, hey, lock up Umaima. But because Lucy is has the privilege, the complexion for the protection, she was able to murder children for years in the UK and nobody said anything. Once again, proving white privilege is real. It's very real. Real with deadly consequences, because from what I know, Lucy Letby was not a person who only killed minority children or melanated children. She was killing all sorts of children. But because white supremacy and white privilege puts a blinders on to the inadequacies of white people or the evil that some white people do, they even hurt themselves. Do you get what I'm saying here? Layberry hopped into the chat. She's guilty and should be facing the death penalty, but poor people were offered money instead. Absolutely. It's a shame that in Uganda, they were able to just give people 10K, which is probably a lot of money for a Ugandan person. But this woman killed 105 children. Think about that. If you miss 21 days of work in a year, you're going to be fired before the year is even over. She killed 21 children a year, over 5 years in her hospital, and she only has to pay 10K for 9 people, right? That's sad. Let's continue though. A British nurse has been found guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 6 others at the hospital where she worked, making her the country's worst baby serial killer in recent times. Lucy Letby, 33, harmed babies in her care by injecting air into their blood and stomachs, overfeeding them with milk, physically assaulting them, and poisoning them with insulin. Manchester Crown Court in Northern England heard. In one case, Letby murdered a baby boy identified as Child E by administering air into his bloodstream, the UK's PA Media News Agency reported. The next day, she attempted to kill his twin brother, Child F, by poisoning him with insulin. A court order protects the identity of the children involved in the allegations against Letby, including those who died and survived under her care. Police found a trove of handwritten notes while searching Letby's house during their investigation, including one that read, I am evil. I did this. I did this. It's so hard to read this, guys. Like, some of this stuff is very, very hard to read, but we have to remember this. We are learning and educating ourselves here because we have to be aware of the privileges of white supremacy and how it shields these people from protection and how we have to be wary of them around us. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. A lot of people might see this picture of this woman, Renee Bach, who went to Africa holding this black baby, and they might say, oh, look at this woman. She's a saint. She's going to help people. And it's very, very likely that this baby she's holding in her hands died. Let's keep it real. These people have the complexion for the protection, and a lot of us in our section see them as innocent as well. And we have to fight against this mindset. We have to fight against this mindset for real. And I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to say it again. A lot of people call me a coon because my wife is white. A lot of people call me an Uncle Tom or a hypocrite because my wife is white. But I would only be a hypocrite if I didn't look at a woman like Lucy Letby and said, you know what, this woman could be a baby murderer. I would only be a hypocrite if I did not speak up about this woman, Renee Bach, murdering black children. I would only be a hypocrite if I didn't talk about the evils that white supremacist women do. I don't downplay my blackness or my black experience or speaking up for our people for exotic sexual access. I don't do that, and I will never do that. I don't have to do that to get women around me because I'm a player from the Himalaya. I'm going to keep it real. You're only a hypocrite, black men who are watching. If you're watching this now or in the playback, you are only a hypocrite if you are with non black people as your romantic partners, if you do not speak out against the evils their people do against us. It does not matter if you have half black children, whatever. As long as you're speaking out against white supremacy and the evils that some of these people do against us, you will never be an Uncle Tom in my book. I don't police the black penis or the black pussy. You can do what you want with your genitalia. And I'm so sick of people attacking me about this. But I'm going to always keep it real. I'm going to always keep it black. And I'm always going to keep it raw. And I will call out anybody who is doing evil towards our people. People like Renee Bach, who traveled to Uganda. By the way, guys, Uganda is in the heart of Africa, set up a charity at 19 years old, told people she was a doctor, and ended up murdering 105 black children. I will say it over and over again because I need this to sink into people's heads. Imagine if this was some Ugandan teenager who went to the heart of Germany or Poland or Lithuania or something, lied and told people he was a doctor, and murdered 105 white European children. Do you think that man will be able to go back to Uganda? Do you think that fake Ugandan teenage doctor who went to a European country and murdered 105 European white, blonde hair, blue eyed children, do you think they would just let that nigga go? Let's keep it real. No. But white privilege, white supremacy shows that a woman like Renee Bach can murder black children, and HBO will make a documentary about her and probably pay her more than what she paid out to the families, to the mothers whose children she took. Let's keep it real. That's evil. That's pure evil. I'm going to continue reading about Lucy Letby because I believe this is a story that's very important. I'm not going to get too deep into it. So she secretly attacked 13 babies on the neonatal ward at the Countess of Chester Hospital between 2015 and 2016, Britain's Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, said in a statement. His intention was to kill the babies while duping her colleagues into believing there was a natural cause of death, prosecutors argued. Pascal Jones of the CPS called Letby's action a complete betrayal of the trust placed in her. Lucy Letby sought to deceive her colleagues and pass off the harm she caused as nothing more than a worsening of each baby's existing vulnerability, she said. In her hands, innocuous substances like air, milk, fluids, or medication like insulin will become lethal. She perverted her learning and weaponized her craft to inflict harm, grief, and death. Victims' families said they may never truly know why this happened. To lose a baby is a heartbreaking experience that no parent should ever have to go through, a joint statement said. But to lose a baby or to have a baby harmed in these particular circumstances is unimaginable, the statement added. So, the crazy thing, once again, about Lucy Letby, she was able to do this for years. She was able to get away with her crime for years. And she had white privilege and white protection that stopped people from investigating why so many babies were dying whenever Lucy was in a room. It happened so much. A doctor who tried to warn people, they reprimanded his ass. And I believe he got fired too. Let's look here. Exclusive. Senior doctor who tried to blow the whistle on Lucy Letby, the baby murderer, says he was intimidated by hospital bosses and was ordered to apologize to the killer nurse. Ain't that a shame? This is Dr. John Gibbs said managers closed their minds too soon about Letby. Chief executive Tony Chambers ordered medics to apologize to nurse. So this was published on August 20th, 2023. By the way, guys, the Lucy Letby is not an old story. Lucy Letby was just arrested this year, and I believe she was accused back in 2017, right? So she was still able to work as a nurse in the hospital, killing children because she had white protection. Blonde hair, blue-eyed white woman was able to get away literally with murder, with the worst type of murder, murdering the innocent. And nobody bats an eye about this. And people had to apologize for even accusing her. That's white supremacy. That's white privilege. We're not playing when we talk about this. This is real. So a senior consultant who tried to blow the whistle on Lucy Letby said doctors felt intimidated by hospital bosses who discouraged them from going to police. Dr. John Gibbs, who has since retired, says managers closed their minds too soon to the possibility that Lucy Letby was killing or harming babies on the neonatal unit. He told the Mail that he was shocked when Chief Executive Tony Chambers called the hospital's 7 consultant pediatricians to a meeting in January 2017 and told them Letby had not done anything wrong. Sad. The hospital boss even ordered medics to write a letter of apology to the nurse. By this stage, Letby, 33, had been working in an office job at the hospital for 7 months and removed following the death of 2 triplets on consecutive shifts in June 2016. Wow. Wow. She killed children back in 2016 and did not get arrested until 2023 and put in jail. Think about that, man. Think about that. The same here happened with Renee Bach, the woman who murdered 100, who allegedly, I'm going to protect myself, allegedly murdered 105 black children in Uganda. She was a 19-year-old high school graduate, traveled there on missionary work to do the good for white Jesus, and took the lives of black children. Lucy Letby got the same treatment, was able to work in a hospital for years, kill children. People had to apologize to her. And then people want to come to my channel and say white supremacy does not exist. Let's go. Dr. John Gibbs says manager closed their minds to the possibility that Lucy Letby was killing or harming babies on the neonatal unit. And this hooker is not a looker. Jesus Christ. All right, Lucy Letby, pictured, was found to have killed 7 children and tried to kill another 6. She will be sentenced at Manchester Crown Court. This is her having a good old time, taking the lives of children, man. It's sad. People that do this to children absolutely make me sick. It doesn't matter if they're white or black, whatever, because Lucy Letby, I believe, took white children's lives as well. But once again, white supremacy and white privilege tells them that, you know what, it's more important to protect white domination, white deniability of guilt, than to actually protect white life, which is showing how white supremacy is dangerous to all people on the planet. And that's why we need to stop it, right? So, I said before that I went to a Presbyterian church as a kid. My dad is Presbyterian, my mom is Catholic. I kind of went to both churches, but my dad went through a midlife crisis and became more religious, and he started forcing me and my brother to go to church. I never got into religion. I never believed in Jesus because it doesn't make sense. God had a son. He sent his son down, but God is actually also his son, and then God died, but then God went to heaven to see God, and God then sent God to hell and that sort of thing. Christianity never made sense to me. Never made sense to me. I consider myself a logical person, and I like things that make sense. And Christianity does not make sense. And I've always thought as well that Christianity, as it was brought to black people, is hella exploitative. It came with colonialism and slavery, by and large. Somebody's going to say, well, the Ethiopians had Christianity forever. Fine, let them have it. The Coptics in Egypt had Christianity forever. Fine, let them have it. But Christianity, as it was brought to black people, mostly from West Africa, Bantu people from West Africa, Central and Southern Africa, was brought through colonialism, force, and coercion. And I've always believed this, and I have not changed my mind at 33 years old. If you are a black Christian of mostly Protestant faith, Methodist, Baptist, whatever, you are somewhat buying into our oppression, because that religion was forced on us by our oppressors and used to cudgel us into submission. So if you're a black person and you say, I'm a Catholic, or I'm a Methodist, or I'm a Lutheran, or I'm an Anglican, you are buying into white supremacy, because all of those things, all of those denominations of Christianity were used to keep us submissive. They literally made Bibles where they took out the verses about Moses leaving Egypt and freeing his people from captivity. They took out all the verses where slaves are granted rights, or it's better for people to be free than enslaved. They took out all of those verses in those Bibles, gave it to a few black slaves who were literate, and forced it onto our people to accept our submission. That's a big reason why I am not a Christian, even though the theology itself does not make sense. And also, I'll say this: the Christianity as it is today is a tool for white supremacists and white people who want to dominate over black people still to this day, which is why we're going to read this article here. Exclusive. U.S. Christian right pours more than $50 million into Africa. Conservative groups increase their spending and activity in what critics call an opportunistic use of Africans for U.S. style culture wars. This was published on October 29th, 2020. Here is a picture. David Bahati at an anti-gay rally at Christianity Focus Center in Mengo, Kiseni on February 17th, 2020, held by religious and political leaders who oppose LGBT rights. Now, why am I tying this all in? I don't want this to seem like I'm caping for gay people or anything like that. It's not like that at all. What I'm saying is that all black life matters. All black life matters. And these white Christians, white American Christians with millions of dollars in funding who are going into Uganda to start charities like Renee Bach did, which ended up killing 105 black children. These charities are going in not with the intention of helping black people, but to get them on their culture war side bullshit that they have going on in the US. The same people who are spending millions of dollars to influence anti-gay bills in Africa and Uganda, where gay people are going to get the death penalty, the same people who are sending millions of dollars to people like Renee Bach, who is a fake doctor who opens a charity and then kills 105 black children, those same white conservative Christians are the same ones in the US who want to teach black children that slavery was okay, that slavery was beneficial to black people. Those same white conservatives. I'm telling this to my Africans, but I'm also telling this to black people in the diaspora or black Americans who are not aware about what's happening in the news and in the political sphere right now. Those same white conservatives and those same white Christians are the same people who are funding what is going on in Africa, these charities and these anti-gay bill laws and all these anti-abortion clinics and all these sorts of right-wing conservative Christian movements in Africa are also being funded by the people in America who are trying to fight against black people's progress. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. These white missionaries who go there, they're not doing God's work. They're doing white supremacy's work. Let's build on this. More than 20 U.S. Christian groups known for fighting against LGBT rights and access to safe abortion, contraceptives, and comprehensive sexuality education have spent at least $54 million in Africa since 2002. These are the results of a new investigation by Open Democracy, which documents the scale of this spending for the first time. The Fellowship Foundation, a secretive U.S. religious group whose Ugandan associate, David Bahati, wrote Uganda's infamous Kill the Gays bill, is the biggest spending in Africa. Between 2008 and 2018, this group sent more than $20 million to Uganda alone. I'm going to keep it real with you guys. I'm going to keep it real with you. Simon Hill keeps it trill. I keep it real with you all the time. I do not hate gay people. I do not think that there is a gay agenda that is dominating the world or anything like that. I'm not gay at all. Not bi, not trans. I don't have any weird sexuality. I'm a pretty straight man. I like pussy. I like my wife's. You know what I mean? I keep it real. I have a brother who is gay, and I don't disagree with his lifestyle at all. He can do what he wants to do. He can be with who he wants to be with. I I am against somewhat children being exposed to sexuality in its entirety. I think a lot of people right now are under the impression that children are being indoctrinated with trans stuff, rainbow flags, gay agenda things, and that sort of thing. But children, by and large, are being influenced by sexuality in general. You go on Instagram right now, you see girls twerking. You can. Everybody has a smartphone, and anybody's only a click away from seeing some titties in their face. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. There is an over sexualization of social media and what goes on in media in general. I don't think it's not an overly homosexual thing. It's a sexuality thing that is pushed a lot into our faces. I don't think any of us can be on the internet for a long time and not get hit with something sexual in our face. And that also includes children as well, right? I don't think it's happening in the classrooms as people try to make it seem. People try to make it seem like every teacher out there is trying to indoctrinate the next generation to be bi or trans binary or whatever like that. I don't even get into all of that. What I'm saying is all Black life matters. And any law that says kill the gays in Uganda is talking about killing Black people. And Black life is sacred to me. I don't care if they're gay, trans, straight, whatever. All black life is sacred. Period. Period. Candace Owens' life is sacred. Clarence Thomas' life is sacred. Every black life is sacred. Period. And anybody talking about kill the gays in Uganda, kill the gays in Kenya, no, no, that's not what we're rocking with. Period. Never. That's what I believe in my full heart. And I'm going to keep on building there. Some of these groups appear to be spending increasing amounts of money in Africa. Their imperialist DNA simply hunts for bigger spheres of influence, said Sylvia Tamale, a prominent Ugandan law professor and gay rights defender, in reaction to Open Democracy's findings. None of the U.S. groups reveals the identities of their funders or details of how exactly they spend their money overseas. Globally, Open Democracy found that a large group of 28 U.S. organizations has spent at least $280 million around the world to influence laws, policies, and public opinion against sexual and reproductive rights. Let's keep it real, guys. Sexual rights, reproductive rights is not only about abortion or allowing people to be in homosexual relationships or marriages. It's about contraceptives. It's about being able to get birth control and things like that. And if you've been alive for the past 30 years, you know that AIDS in Africa is a real big deal, and they're talking about getting rid of condoms, something that can help prevent the spread of HIV, a disease that has ravaged black people for the past few decades. These Christian groups think that giving people condoms, giving people birth control, not letting teenage girls, like what happens in Uganda, have 3 or 4 children by the time they're 20 years old. They think that's what they need to be spending their money on, trying to prevent all of that, preventing people from having condoms, preventing women from being able to control their reproduction. Because the Christian right is insane, is insane. Let's keep on building. I got a comment here from Layberry. I don't know about Candace Owens. Yeah, I might have reached right there, but my thing is this: all black life is sacred. I don't care if they're on the right or left, Muslim, Christian, whatever. I view all black people as a part of us, right? And even though I am a black American and I know that we have a special destiny because of our heritage, because we as black Americans have always stood up for all black people, but I view every black life as sacred. No black person is irredeemable, right? And we need to always advocate for each other, because if Candace Owens right now had a knee on her neck by another Derek Chauvin, I think you and I, Layberry, and every other sane black person will be out there saying, like, that's wrong. We know our sister was lost. We know she got bitten by the bug of White Zaddy, and White Zaddy is in her ear telling her to attack them niggas, right? But we still would go out there and protest for Candace. That's how I feel. That's how I feel. All black life is sacred. So creating mass hysteria around homosexuality is a notable component of the work of U.S. Christian rights groups in Africa, says Jessica Horn, an Afro-feminist who has studied Christian fundamentalism on the continent for more than a decade. Their agenda, she says, includes opposing reproductive rights and controlling women's bodies. The $280 million dark money global empire of the U.S. Christian right. Since 2008, U.S. Christian rights groups, many of them linked to the Trump administration and notorious for fighting LGBT and women's reproductive rights, has spent more than $280 million of dark money outside the U.S. Explore their empires of influence. This is a very deep map, and I hope y'all look into this. All the links will be in the descriptions, and you can look more into that graph. So let's go here. Exporting hate to Africa. Two groups that oppose contraception and abortion, Human Life International and Heartbeat International, have spent at least $4.3 million combined on the continent. An earlier Open Democracy investigation found that crisis pregnancy centers affiliated with Heartbeat violate South African law on abortion counseling and discourage contraception in Uganda. It's imperialism. It's neocolonialism. It's basically the Bible that they are coming back with, which is not African, says Sibongile Ndashe, a South African feminist who heads the Institute for Strategic Litigation in Africa, ISLA. Haley McEwen, a researcher at the Wits Center for Diversity Studies at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa, calls U.S. religious rights groups a well-resourced transnational network of conservative organizations. This reminds me about what Saudi Arabia was doing back in the 70s and 80s when they were exporting their Wahhabism. And if you don't know what Wahhabism is, it's like extreme uh, Orthodox Muslim theology, right? women in the cob, cut the hand off of the thief, that sort of thing, right? And America has been exporting its sort of weird, twisted religious groups. This is why when I was in Africa, when I was in Dar es Salaam, I saw Mormons out there. I saw Mormons in Dar es Salaam. And unfortunately, I saw a black brother with them as well. I saw a black Mormon in Africa. There were two white guys with the white cutoff shirts and the long black tie, the long skinny black tie, and one black brother with them as well. And he was obviously African American. I could tell by the way he was walking and talking. I could tell he was a black American out there in Africa pushing Mormonism. Mormonism. Really, guys? Really? That's what we're doing now? No, no. America has weird twists on Christianity. We make everything weird, right? And we're putting that stuff back out in the world. That's why now, when I talk to some of my students in Latin America, you would think Latin America would mostly be Catholic because of the Spanish Empire. But now I'm talking to people now who are Adventist, who are Mormons, who are different types of Protestants. What was the one that Michael Jackson was of? Jehovah's Witness, right? America is exporting our weird versions of Christianity around the world, right? And yeah, it's sad. And it's very similar to what Saudi Arabia did. With all their money and resources, they spread their extreme version of Islam. And then what happened 20, 30 years later? We get 9/11, right? We're going to have a 9/11 event in Africa, I swear, if we continue to allow the white supremacist Christians in America to send money to uh, influence the Africans to think like they do, right? And the 9/11 event might not be a terrorist attack, but it might be an event where, we have some religious theocracy based on these uh, American Christian principles in Africa, right? Like imagine Florida in Africa, right? Imagine Ron DeSantis's anti-woke Florida in Africa, and how crazy that would be, right? And that's what we're talking about here. That's what I think might happen in the future if we continue to see this trend of these Christian groups in America funding these churches and these sorts of movements to get rid of contraception, to get rid of abortion rights, to hate on gay people. It's going to be a tragedy years from now. But let's keep building. McEwen says they are exporting hate to Africa and other parts of the world, along with US-style culture wars and polarization over issues relating to gender and sexuality. While same-sex marriage was legalized in the US in 2015, same-sex relationships of any kind remain criminalized in many African countries. Some African activists suspect this is what has drawn US conservatives to the continent. They have lost support in their home country. Now they are looking for countries where they can dump their ideologies, says Frank Mugisha, a Ugandan LGBT rights activist. They do it somewhere else where they feel they have more power. Exactly, guys. Exactly. One of the things that you'll learn from life as you get older, whenever white people can't make friends with other white people, or whenever other white people discredit other white people, those white people who lost end up trying to make friends with black people. Let's keep it real. Let's look through history. Libya, what happened in Libya? Muammar Gaddafi, right? He wanted to unite the Arab world. He wanted to create one big Arab state. He wanted to unite Libya, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. Uh, he wanted to unite all of them into one big Arab state. But the Arabs weren't rocking with Gaddafi like that. So they were rocking with the guy in Egypt. Oh, man, what was his name? Before Sadat, the guy before Sadat, Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser. They were rocking with Nasser back in the 60s. Gamal Abdel Nasser was able to get all the Arabs on their side, and Libya tried to invade Egypt, right? Libya, Muammar Gaddafi was hating on Gamal Abdel Nasser so much, he wanted to invade Egypt. Gaddafi did some terrorist attacks in the UK and other parts of the world. The whole world started to shun him, and the Arab countries started to shun him too, even though Libya has a lot of oil money. So then when Libya doesn't have any more friends in the Arab world, or the white world doesn't want him anymore, what does he do? Hello, my African brothers. Let's form an African union. Let's put all of the currencies under one gold. Let me help you, Africans, black Africans. Come, let's join together, brothers. We've always been brothers, right? We are all brothers, right? This is what Gaddafi did. Let's keep it real right now. Russia, right now, in a war with Ukraine. Before the war in Ukraine, Russia was doing pretty okay economically. They had a lot of gas and oil being sold into Europe. Russian billionaires all in the yachts of the Mediterranean banging bad Spanish broads. It was lit. It was lit in Russia for the oligarchs and everything like that. Putin starts the war. All of Europe is against Russia. Everybody in the world is sanctioning Russia. Russians are now being terrorized across the world. People are scared to pull out their Russian passports or to even speak Russian in public. And now, what are the Russians doing? A lot of Russians moving in Africa. I swear to God, this is not a fake story. When I was in Mombasa, Kenya, and I was going to the beach in the middle of the day, there will be mad Russians out there. Mad Russians are in Africa. It is not a joke. I am not making this up. This is real. I saw it with my own eyes. I was playing my guitar on the beach. A guy, when I'm done playing and I'm walking away, a guy says, "Hello, thank you for playing." And I tell him, "Spasiba." Spasiba is thank you in Russian. And he says, "Ho, ho, ho." He knows Russian. I swear, it's a true story. Not a lie. Not a lie at all. And also, as well, what is Russia trying to do? If we think about it geopolitically, Russia is trying to make friends with all the African nations. They're funding, they're helping all these rebel groups in Niger, in Sudan, in different places. Russia is trying to make black friends because white people don't want to fuck with them no more. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. Keep it real. I'll keep it even more real. Y'all rock with me here. When the Nazis, when the Nazis lost World War II, the kings of white supremacy, when they lost World War II, where did many of the Nazis go? Anybody in the chat? Anybody in the chat? Where did the Nazis go? Where did a lot of the Nazis go after World War II? Nobody answered. A lot of them went to Brazil. Brazil, one of the blackest nations in the world, the nation that has more black people, that nation has more black people uh, than any other nation outside of Africa. A lot of the Nazis went to Brazil and also Argentina. Argentina had a history of killing their black people, but there are still black people in Argentina in different pockets and places. But let's keep it real. The Nazis had to go hide and take refuge among black Brazilians because half of Brazil is like black. Every time the white supremacists lose, anytime white people can't get their ideas popping with other white people, they got to come around us. And unfortunately, a lot of black people don't know how the white supremacists think. They don't know. These Africans I'm looking at in this picture right here, they don't know that a lot of the white supremacists in the back are only around them because other white people look at them and say, these guys are lunatics. But a lot of the black Africans aren't aware that the white supremacists think this way. So they allowed them in with open arms. Hello, welcome to Uganda. Thank you for coming to Uganda. Can I do anything for you? Can I dance for you? Can I take picture with you? Can I travel with you to Europe? I'm going to continue, man. Part of a bigger fight. Frederick Clarkson is a researcher at the Political Research Associates think tank in Massachusetts, which exposed the links between U.S. religious activists and anti-gay legislation in Uganda in 2004. He said the wider context of these groups' increasing activity and spending in Africa is a fight for the United Nations. One of the groups, Family Watch International (FWI), is campaigning to ban comprehensive sexuality education (CSE) in at least 10 African countries, and has since 2010 been coaching African diplomats on how to negotiate for conservative causes via an annual training program in the US. They have lost support at home. They're looking for countries where they can dump their ideologies. Facts. In recent decades, Clarkson says the UN has become an increasingly progressive institution and subject to an organized backlash from those who oppose women's and LGBT rights. Take the power of individual nations, even poor nations, and align it with conservative American and European interests. That changes the balance of power and moves it in a conservative direction. Very interesting. Never thought about it like that. They're influencing the third world because they want to have control in the UN. Very interesting. Never thought about it like that. Clarkson also notes the history of Christianity in Africa as a big part of the European colonial project. Mugisha, the Ugandan activist, draws similar parallels. It feels like the beginning, those dark days when Africa was looked at like this dark continent and there was a scramble for it. Let's go and scramble for Africa and take territories. They're like, let's go into Africa and take our ideas. They'll buy into them. An opportunistic use of Africans. One group of the groups that are active in Africa, 10 are members of the World Congress of Families, WCF, which has been linked to white supremacists in the US and Europe. Nonetheless, lots of clergy in Africa are willing to partner with them, partly because they share conservative views, but also because they're being opportunistic about the money, says Jessica Horn. WCF President Brian Brown denied the network had links to white supremacy and said, we condemn racism. That doesn't mean you condemn white supremacy. Racism and white supremacy are two different things. White supremacy is power to dominate over people and dictate who is valuable and who is invaluable. And racism is just, I don't like black people. I don't like white people. But that's not power. There's no power in that. Let's continue building. It's an opportunistic use of African. She laments that we're not always keyed into why it's problematic to align ourselves with white supremacist power. Uh, what? Even though we've been colonized and should know better. Yeah, you should know better, buddy. You should know better. You should be wary of anybody who comes to Africa who is not black talking about we want to help Africa. Because when have they ever done it? When have they ever done it? Never. Let's go. U.S. money and religious conservative agendas have a track record of intersecting with health policy in Africa to tragic effect. In 2005, George W. Bush's President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, reserved two-thirds of its HIV prevention funds for the abstinence and fidelity campaigns, strongly supported by religious conservatives. PEPFAR spent about $1.4 billion on such programs. A 2016 study of about 500,000 people in 22 countries found no evidence that these abstinence programs were effective. Spending money and having no effect is a pretty costly thing because the money could be used elsewhere to save lives, said Iran Ben David, a Stanford University assistant professor and one of the researchers on the study, right? So the black mind says, in just slow by. All right. Well, I don't know what that means. So, yeah. In some cases, PEPFAR money supported African ultra conservative Christians such as Martin Sempa in Uganda, who promoted anti LGBT sentiments. Researchers have also found that arrests and convictions under anti gay laws have significantly reduced the use of HIV prevention and care services by gay men in Africa, undercutting the progress against the HIV and AIDS epidemic that PEPFAR sought. The Fellowship Foundation and Human Life International did not respond to open democracy requests for comment. A representative of Heartbeat International said that it is a nonprofit federation of faith-based pregnancy resource centers, medical clinics, maternity homes, and nonprofit adoption agencies. It said, because every woman should be loved and supported during her pregnancy, Heartbeat International celebrates and serves local and regional life-affirming pregnancy help organizations across all continents and cultures, including Africa, etc., etc. So, once again, guys, these people are pushing ideas that we in America have fought against a long time. I was a kid growing up in Louisiana, very conservative, Christian, Bible thumping Louisiana. They gave us all those abstinent programs. They gave us no sex ed education. They did not give us contraceptives. And what does Louisiana have? My home state. Louisiana has some of the highest teen pregnancy rates in the nation. Louisiana has some of the highest child mortality rates, meaning children dying as soon as they're born, in the nation. Louisiana has some of the highest AIDS rates in the nation. Christians, conservative American Christians, whenever they control government, they make it worse for everybody. How do I know? Because I live under them. What these Ugandans, what these Africans want from the white Christian conservatives that are spending millions of dollars there is to live in Mississippi. What the Ugandans want is to live in Mississippi, and nobody in America right now wants to be in Mississippi. Even people in Mississippi don't want to be in Mississippi. Because what happens in Mississippi? Lots of teenage pregnancy, lots of AIDS, lots of poverty, lots of people going down the drain. It's not because of black people's faults. It's because of white evangelicals like Renee Bach, who traveled to Uganda and murdered 105 black children. The white Christian evangelicals are a curse. For the Africans out there, for the Africans, anybody who watches this, clips this, please send this to an African. Please send this right now, this message right now. The white missionaries, the white Christians who are sending money, food, aid, who are telling you to hate on gay people, who are trying to ban abortion, who are telling you to follow the Bible to a T, don't even follow the Bible to a T in their own country, in the United States where they come from. And on top of that, every time they are in power, they make it worse, specifically for black people. I am from Louisiana. We are controlled by evangelical Christians like this. They make it hard to get abortion, hard to get contraceptives, hard to do anything, hard to live a basic, decent human life in 2023. You don't want to live under them. Please, there is another way. There is another way. You can be Christian. You can be religious. But don't be a white evangelical Christian because they are literally crazy. They are crazy. And on top of that, many of them are anti black, racist, and have white supremacist views. They deny that racism even exists. They deny that slavery was a bad thing. They deny that Africa had any prior civilization to colonialization. These people think less of us. People like Renee Bach, who probably murdered this black child in her hand, do not see us as equal. And for the last thing that we're going to jump at today, we're going to talk about the missionary system in Africa in general and how it has been abusing children for years. This was published on June 9th, 2023 on bruminate.com. Once again, all the links are in the description. And once again, guys, we have to change our mindset when we see this picture. When we see images like this of a white woman holding a black boy's hand, we might see this and say, oh, how cute. This woman is giving up her privilege and prestige to go to Africa to help children. We have to look at this and possibly see somebody who is a pedo, somebody who is an abuser, somebody with evil intentions or racist views. Because white supremacy affects the mind to make you look at a picture like this and say, oh, this woman is doing a good thing. But let this be a big black man holding the hand of a small white girl. What would you think of this picture? You would not say, oh, that's a woman or that's a person trying to do something good to help people. You would say that person is a pedo. Well, that person is trying to abuse that child. We have to think the same thing because the history of white women in Africa has not been nice. Renee Bach murdered 105 black children, pretending to be a doctor. People gave her money, and now HBO is making a documentary about the broad. Come on now. So this was written by Dr. Andrina Pritchard, Associate Professor of Honors in African History at the University of Oklahoma. White woman as a professor. Is it a white woman? She might be a black woman. I just hella light skin. Let's go. So, introduction. Matthew Durham, a young missionary from Oklahoma, was convicted in 2015 of raping 3 girls and molesting a boy at the Upendo Children's Home. He had volunteered at the Kenyan orphanage from 2012 to 2014. A federal jury found Durham guilty under a 2003 law that makes crimes committed against children abroad punishable in the United States, and U.S. District Court Judge David L. Russell sentenced him to 40 years in prison. Durham has always maintained his innocence, and his legal team say they now have evidence to prove it. Several of the children who testified against Durham, now young adults, came forward in 2021 to say that he never abused them. Rather, they alleged that they and other residents at the children's home were coached, beaten, and coerced by Kenyan orphanage staff to fabricate stories of sexual abuse and give false testimony against Durham. Possibly, most likely, there's some money being exchanged here. Those kids now are adults and they're realizing how hard it is in Uganda, and now they're trying to get some money out of the Mazungu that came there when they were younger and played with their pee. Or even worse, Mr. Mazungu, who's now in the US, still has connects in Uganda and is sending money, a few $100 or a few $1,000 to get some business done, to get the people slapped around, to have his conviction turned around. Possibly. I've been to Africa, guys. I know it's real dirty down there. I know how it works, man. I know how it works. I'm not saying I'm an expert on all things Africa, but we got to keep it real. That's probably what's going on here. This man went there and abused children. This is not a new thing. These white saviors are going to Africa and literally abusing children, sexually assaulting children, killing children. And Africans still to this day look at them and say, we are happy to have you in Uganda. Come on now. Come on now. I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. I got to take a cough break. Let's go. In 2022, Durham's legal team filed a motion with the Western District Court of Oklahoma, giving evidence of the children's new testimonies and requesting that the court overturn Durham's conviction and vacate his sentence. Although the judge denied Durham's petition based on a legal technicality, his legal team has appealed to the 10th Circuit Court in Denver. As a historian who studies evangelical missions in Africa, including missionaries' efforts to save African children, I have spent much of the last 5 years trying to make sense of this case. Any way you look at it, both the initial allegations against Durham and the new claims of abuse and false testimony are tragic. As Durham waits to see how the courts will rule, I believe his story offers an opportunity to examine the system that made the very existence of this orphanage, Durham's visits to it, and the competing claims about him possible. 2 centuries of white saviors. Obs- the Western obsession with African orphans began in the 1830s when British and European mission organizations started working in Eastern Africa, the same region where Durham would volunteer nearly 200 years later. The Bible's call to visit orphans and widows in their through the raiding and warring that fueled the Indian Ocean slave trade. Ain't that something? The white supremacists robbed Africa of the men and women, turned them into slaves, and shipped them out across the world. And then the missionaries come saying that we need to be saviors for these children who are orphans, because the African men or women are not there to take care of their children. Maybe they're too lazy, maybe they're sexually deviant, maybe they don't control their genitalia enough. So we have to raise the next generation of African children. That's sick. That's sick. For anybody who thinks that's not wrong, imagine if the roles were reversed. That's all you have to do. And then you'll realize that this is white supremacy in play. Many of these children ended up at mission run orphanages or residential schools, which were supported by Western donors and at times their governments. Critics of these interventions, such as the Victorian novelist Charles Dickens, alleged that the missionaries' focus on amassing converts blinded them to the well being of children in their care. For example, in the 1890s, a famine caused many children to seek support at an orphanage run by the Church Missionary Society at Freratown, near Mombasa, Kenya. When parents or relatives later tried to bring their children home, the missionaries refused to release them, believing they would lose converts and significantly the donations that supported their work. Ain't that a shame? So these missionaries claiming to help the children because their parents weren't around. When the parents came back, these white missionaries kidnapped the kids and said, no, we can't give them to you because they might be reconverted back to your religion, whether that be Islam or animism, or they might not be Christians anymore. So being a Christian is more important than being with your parents. That's wild. And then on top of that, they were using the children just as bait to get money. Just as bait to get money, to get people to donate to their church and to their charities. That's sick. That's absolutely sick. The orphan industrial complex. Today, a similar fixation on profit is part of what motivates orphanage founders, travel companies, and promotes orphan tourism, and the Western donors, missionaries, and travelers that support them. Experts call this the orphan industrial complex. This is a system wherein efforts to care for vulnerable children become entangled with the business interests of the individuals and institutions involved. Paradoxically, research shows that orphanage founders, tour companies, and mission organizations often benefit most when the goal of serving vulnerable children is not accomplished. They have a vested interest in not helping the kids. Their interest is in not helping the kids, because who's going to donate to an orphanage that doesn't have any kids, that doesn't need any help? You know what I mean? So one can't be in the business of saving orphans if there are no orphans to be saved. So savvy orphanage founders and their sponsors often lie about the numbers and the backgrounds of the children under their care. In fact, around 80% of the 8 million children in residential care around the world are not actually orphans, at least not by the commonly understood definition of a child who has lost both parents. The majority of these children have at least one living parent or extended families that could, with the right support, care for them at home. This includes orphanage residents in Kenya, where Durham worked. Wow. So think about that. People are sending their kids, or people are taking kids that actually have parents or people that could look after them. But I would assume that what's happening is this. Well, before I assume, let's look here. One way children end up at orphanages like Upendo is through a form of trafficking, in which recruiters take children from their families, often under false pretenses, and sell them to orphanage proprietors. Others are enticed with promises of free education or are taken from the streets and housed without government knowledge. Ain't that a shame? I know things are bad in Uganda, so people are looking for ways for their children to advance. So they're probably getting told your child will have a good education here, your child will get treated well here, and you don't have the money to send them to the private school, but send them to us and we'll take care of them. And then what happens? This child is literally trafficked, is used as a prop, is used as some sort of commodity to then be traded, to then be sold to another orphanage proprietor. That's sad. All these people who talk about we need to care for the children, We need to look out for human trafficking of children and all this sort of thing. It's happening in Africa right now. That's how this white woman, Renee Bach, could travel to Africa and murder 105 African children, set up a fake charity, set up this organization where people think they're going to get this great care because this blonde haired, blue eyed white woman came to Africa and she's going to take care of all these African children. And the Kenyans and the Ugandans and all the black Africans there see a white person and they just get on their knees because they think they've just seen God. And that's how our children end up dead. That's how our black children end up getting abused sexually by these predators. That's how our children end up missing. And we need to do something about that. We need to do something about that. And first and foremost, we need to not worship whiteness. Let's get that out of our brains. Harming children. Researchers have found that children raised in residential care facilities are often stigmatized and experience developmental delays. There is also a large amount of evidence that children who live in orphanages, especially if they have disabilities, face much higher risks of violence, abuse, and neglect than other kids. One study of 6 low-income countries, including Kenya, found that 50.3% of children in orphanages experienced sexual abuse. Further, Western missionaries and volunteers are encouraged to behave toward orphans in ways that further increase their risk of abuse. Pulling children aside for one-on-one time, initiating close physical contact, and buying them gifts are often referred to encouragingly as ways of loving on orphanage residents. I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. I don't have any kids, but if I had any kids and I sent them to like some, summer camp or anything, the first thing I would tell my kids is don't have any one-on-one time with anybody who is not your age. Don't spend any time with any adult alone, period. And unfortunately, guys, a lot of places in Africa, the rules are not followed to the T. I used to teach in Africa. I used to teach in Tunisia. And there will be times where they just pushed me in a classroom with a book with 20 kids, and I was just supposed to teach. I don't know. They just put me in a room. I taught, but I've always felt uncomfortable when I was with one child in a room alone. And by the way, I was not teaching kids who were like 5 or 6 or 7. I was teaching kids, let's say 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? Like, tweens and teenagers, stuff like that, right? But I never felt comfortable just being alone with one child because I would imagine if I was a kid, I wouldn't want to be around some old nigga anyway. Why are you hanging around me? I don't care if I'm your teacher. Go hang out with your friends. And on top of that, if I had kids, I wouldn't want them being alone in a room with the teacher. I don't care if Mr. Simon is Mr. Nice. Don't be in a room with Mr. Simon alone because you don't know that motherfucker. Get what I'm saying? I don't have kids. But yeah, I think every parent should care for their kids and not let them be alone with grown men or grown women, because women be abusing kids too, unfortunately. And women be killing kids too, like Renee Bach here, unfortunately. But we need to take better care of our kids and teach them that don't be around these adults by themselves. And unfortunately, in Africa, there's probably not that culture, right, of giving kids warnings and talking about that. Let's go. From a child protection perspective, these behaviors are also potential warning signs of grooming by a sexual predator and can numb children to potential risks. Some governments in Europe, Central Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean are trying to phase out these orphanages, as well as in some African countries like Kenya. The country where Durham went several times for short stints as a volunteer is attempting to replace residential children's homes with family-based foster and community-based care over the next decade. Organizations such as Africa Impact and Projects Abroad, two US-based companies that organize volunteer opportunities on the continent, have phased out orphanage tourism programs, an entire system on trial. The conviction of a white missionary for child abuse isn't unprecedented. Like Durham, Gregory Dow, an American who had run another Kenyan orphanage, was convicted in 2015 of sexually abusing some of its young residents. Daniel Stephen Johnson of Coos Bay, Oregon, was sentenced to life in prison in 2019 for sexually abusing children in Cambodia. The white supremacists are obsessed with abusing kids. I don't know why. These people are sick. Other such offenders, including Richard Huckle and Simon Harris, have gone from the UK to orphanages in low-income countries and sexually abused the children they were supposedly there to help. There is also a sordid cast of missionary organizations and local proprietors of orphanages in low-income countries that commit crimes while purporting to do good. But these new claims by the Upendo survivors are unique because they illuminate the various forms of violence to which children in residential care are exposed, both by missionaries missionaries and the very people purporting to protect them. According to the legal documents and news coverage I've reviewed, the former orphanage residents who recanted their testimonies against Durham haven't said why orphanage staff told them to lie. It would be a tragedy if it turns out Durham has been in prison for a crime he did not commit, but regardless of whether he is eventually exonerated, I believe it is ultimately the children who will have suffered the most. Yeah, most likely this guy is guilty. But even if he is, there have been possibly hundreds of other people who have abused kids in these African orphanages, schools, and that sort of thing. And that needs to stop. I'm going to end here with of whites worshiping. I've said this about my video in Kenya and in Tanzania, and I said it a lot today here in this video as well. But this is a study that was done, and I believe it's interesting. I'm going to read all of it because it's an entire study, like 12 pages of dense material. We're not going to get into that. I'm just going to get into this abstract right here. I'm just going to read this part. Black African children, the number was 214 between 5 and 12 years old, living in rural Uganda, exhibited substantial pro-white racial bias, preferring whites over black children 78% of the time. Ugandan children also judged white children as higher status than black children, and these status judgments predicted their degree of pro-white bias. Our results indicate that pro-white racial bias can emerge even in homogenous black communities, and that in some contexts, minimal status cues can be sufficient for the early development of racial prejudice. So it's not a game. I'm not making it up. Even scientists, people who study this for a living, have noticed that the Africans worship the white man, and that needs to change because I'm going to keep it real. Black Americans, we've been through a lot with these devils. We've been through a lot with the white supremacists and people who have tried to exterminate us for years. But I have not heard of a time where black women and black men willingly gave up our children to white people who said that they were going to be our saviors, and then they ended up dead. I can't think of a time like that. They used to sell our children. They used to sell our mothers. They used to sell and separate families. That was not of our volition. And some of those people died on those other plantations or houses, wherever they went. But I do not remember a time. And if anybody can prove me wrong in history, I will shut up about this. And I'll never talk about this again. I'll only do celebrity content. I can't think of a time when black people in America willingly gave up our children to white saviors, white missionaries, white Christians like this in large numbers, and 105 of us ended up dead. Why did that not happen to us black Americans? It's because we don't worship white supremacy. We don't see white people and start tap dancing and smiling and grinning like the Africans do. I'm not hating on y'all Africans. I'm just giving y'all some tough love and some real game, because this is a shame that y'all are allowing these people to come over there, brainwash y'all with the type of Christianity that has ruined America, and now they're trying to ruin Uganda with it, and y'all are buying into it just because y'all ain't never seen a white person before. That's a shame, and that's embarrassing, and that has to quit. And y'all are teaching your children to look at white people as gods on earth as well, putting up images of white Jesus in the home, sending your children to these clinics ran by a 19-year-old white girl from Virginia claiming to be a doctor. Wake up. You're teaching your children to look at white people as superior, which is what this study is talking about. And that needs to stop, because we as a people will never move forward as long as the Africans continue to look at the white man as God. And I mean that with my full heart. And I'm willing to fight and die about that, for real. That thing pissed me off, man. When I went to Africa and saw the Africans acting that way around white people, it embarrassed the hell out of me and broke my heart. But we can do better. We can do better. Last thing I'll talk about today, I want to say I apologize for this video I made last year. Why did this British woman adopt 14 African orphans in Tanzania? I didn't rewatch the video, but I pretty much remember that I probably said, like, this is a good thing, this is a humanitarian thing. But now, after reading this story about Renee Bach, who murdered 105 Ugandan children, I know that this woman is probably up to some nasty things in this orphanage that she's running in Tanzania as well. So I want to say thank you for everybody for watching. Even if you watch this on the playback, I'm trying to live stream every day. I'll be consistent and persistent. I'm pursuing my goals of blowing up this YouTube channel to provide information for Black travelers, Black people abroad, voicing my opinion. I'm always going to keep it real. I'm always going to keep it Black. I'm always going to keep it raw. Thanks for watching. I got a lot of work to do, but I'll see you again tomorrow. Any comments, any suggestions on topics, send it my way. Send it in the email. Leave it in the comments. We're going to build heavy this year. Thanks for watching, and peace.